I realized today that I've made a bunch of videos recently talking about specific elements in and around this garden, but I haven't actually brought people up to speed with what's been happening as a big picture within this space in a while. This is one of our many gardens. This is at our smaller Edible Acres 2 site, 0.1 acre backyard garden. This is our 5th growing season transitioning over from a wet lawn to this, and it is at this point pretty insanely productive. We love this space. It's a little overwhelming at times. It's a little bit of a mess, a little hard to get through here or there, but I thought I'd take a rambling tour, so stick with me as I try to bushwhack my way through our crazy garden at the end of the season here. And what I'll offer up is I won't spend a ton of detail and time in any given area, but if there's some areas that are really exciting to you that you want to know more about, let me know in the comments and maybe we can do some highlight videos going into some detail. But let's go into the main garden. So coming in, you can see we've got our nice little sawdust pathway here. Made a video recently where I talked about how Sasha and I were scraping our walkways and putting that material onto the beds to help renovate for the fall. And so some of our beds are a lot more shapely these days because of that. Since we're such a wet site, we really do need to dig down and build up to have things work out. Every bed in here is complex and unique, very high density, very high diversity. Some have some themes. So for example, this first bed Sasha designed for the most part, and it has some culinary flower elements. I think it's a type of marigold there she uses in cooking. And then there's some interesting crops. We need to have her do a tour in here at some point, but this is some sort of chicory endive type plant that she's letting bolt to collect seed from. And this bed overall a little bit more towards annual crop production. You can see beets and leeks. There were carrots in here. There's a little borage. So it's a more straightforward looking garden bed right there, which is kind of nice. Right next to it, got a little medley of things happening. You can see one lone radish. This was a black Spanish round radish that was particularly large from the last group, and so we're going to let that bolt and make seeds. Very common theme in our garden is to keep an eye out for plants that look like they're doing well and collect seed from them. You can see this carpet of green in here. This is a little bit more of my nursery work. This is all Sweet Sicily, Murris odorata, which we sell through the website. Casting seed in the fall and letting it somewhat naturalize for a season. Where there's gaps, we've got some lettuce and some beets. So even though this is predominantly a nursery production bed, wherever we have space, we try to fill with whatever seed is appropriate at the time. We're also using this bed to grow some cultivar apricots from seed, and it's a stool layer bed for ranch elderberry. So somewhat complex. You can see there's a whole bunch of soil in there. When those elderberries come out this fall, this is going to be a just stupefyingly luscious bed. It's going to be fun to figure out what happens next in there. So some annual crop production, some nursery crops right next to each other. Same basic theme going on. So here's a variety of sorrel that never bolts or seeds. We're using that as an edge plant. And where there's a gap in there, we're trying to seed out more of our root crops for the fall. So there's radishes and beets. Wherever there's bare soil, we always try to either transplant in or this time of year seed out for something that can get us into the fall. It's another highlight of Sasha's culinary work, papalo. It's like cilantro on acid. It's really intense, flavorful, certainly annual where we live, but really beautiful. Every time I bump into it by accident, I just reek of papalo for the whole rest of the time I'm in the garden. There's little sentinels of them all over the place that are right next to the pathway, so you're bound to bop them. Some of these beds are so overrun and chaotic, it's kind of hard to even begin digesting what's going on, but we're trialing a couple perennial artichoke type plants. These have overwintered 3 years in a row. This is called Cardoon. We're still trying to decode how to make Cardoon into food. it has thus eluded us. Maybe someone's got some ideas of great ways to eat cardoon. We're all ears. Some beds we noticed, that like in this bed, the dominant weed was horsetail, which Sasha uses for medicine making and to cook with sometimes. We took a cue from the soil that it's a particularly wet spot, so this year the whole bed is set to celeriac. Very wet tolerant, wet loving celery-like plant. So celery root. And they take forever to size up, but that's fine. The whole bed can be in celeriac with some stray walking onions here or there, and we'll come back to that. It was wet enough that the pear that we had in here actually died from exposure to wetness, so we'll have to come up with a better centerpiece plant for that. Transitioning over to another bed that is more nursery centric or nursery dominant. These are Japanese negi, or an improved Welsh onion. We're actually offering through the website now. A bunch of folks have ordered them, which we're excited to offer. Hardy, perennial, beautiful onion. They're late season, they're a little haggard, but they're still doing their thing. Folks can check out, we're really excited to grow this, starting to get a feel for what it is. This is wild native licorice. And starting to see, not only is it hardy to here and native to New York State, but overwinters, and now we're seeing it starting to spread. I feel like it's going to be weedy in a pretty fun way. We'll see if we can lift that and move it along. Here's a bed of all seaberry or sea buckthorn. Started from seed last year, and I'm stool layering these as well. Almost looks like rosemary in the phone. Super spiky, lovely nitrogen fixer. Very feral, wild, ancient type that we have here. And in fact, to the bed just next to, south of it, very different look to it. These are some of the more modern cultivar seaberry. I took softwood cuttings last year, they rooted beautifully, and so now we're growing them out for a season. This is a variety called Orange Energy. Almost completely thornless, huge fruit. Trying to ramp up our numbers so we can offer seaberry in the next season or two. More interesting mix of beds. Got some culinary and just beautiful flowers here or there, some nasturtiums, some tulsi or holy basil popping, and some beans. And then we've been transplanting in transplants of arugula and mustard greens to get us into the fall. So the beds that are a little darker and more bare are beds that have just been seeded out or transplanted for fall transition crops. Like here's all black Spanish, round radish, and cilantro is on the far end there. So there are little gaps here or there. We're trying our best this season to really get the garden dialed in and filled with crops that can transition us into the fall. Here's kind of a nice mix of elements. So here's red Russian kale getting up to size. Should be a beautiful size coming into the colder time of year. And that's actually being used as a cover crop, very useful cover crop, around a bed of grafted apples. So again, nursery and other mixes together. We don't have distinct nursery beds per se. These are all different named varieties apples that I grafted over winter. And they grew out for a season here. One or two failed. That's par for the course. But here's one, Ashmead's kernel, growing along. And so we'll either sell these or, more likely than not, try to just plant them. We want to plant as many food-bearing trees as we can possibly afford the time to do so. And so here's a bed of some grafted apples, and then more grafted apples. Did about 300 this winter. There's that little pond I was talking about in the last video. Still holding water quite nicely, hasn't dropped much at all. Maybe an inch, half inch, quarter inch. And lovely mix here of Malokia, or Egyptian's mallow. Sasha cooks with this. It's like stinging nettle, except it doesn't sting. And definitely distinctly an annual in our climate, but really intense, mucilaginous, deep flavor. Wonderful, nourishing, medicinal green. This bed's flanked with Monarda punctata. It's kind of a more rare native bee balm. Stacked flowers, really showy, beautiful plant. Kind of hard to even know where to go in this garden. We've got seedless Concord grapes that are being stool layered, some cultivar black currants, on and on and on. I've gone over the 10-minute mark. I haven't really talked about much of the garden. What I think I'll do is pause here and offer up, let us know what sort of key things are you most interested in. And I would say be vocal in the comments. The more Sasha reads that people want to hear from her, the more likely it is she'll make a video. She's not super comfortable being in front of the camera, but she has so many interesting ideas and so many unique crops that she works with that maybe enough folks can say that they want that. We'll see if we can get her in front of the camera to talk about the crazy beautiful stuff she's doing in here, culinary plant-wise and flower-wise. But yeah, lots more trees and shrubs, more nursery work, every bed complex. At some point I'd like to inventory what we have in here, but I would venture a guess in this less than 1/10 of an acre we have at least 200 maybe plus different types of plants that are all growing in a riot next to each other, but all pretty much thriving. It's a fun space to be in. Thanks for sticking with me on this rambling tour. If you made it to the end of the video, the secret word is rutabaga. If you write that in the comments, I'll know that you're a true fan. Anyway, thanks for watching and enjoying this weird evening time video.